In 1941, Japan ruled the Pacific. Its empire stretched across thousands of miles of ocean. Its armies conquered islands. Its navy dominated the seas. But far below the surface, something unseen was moving. No warning. No mercy. No sound. American submarines did not fight for glory. They did not seek headlines. They hunted in silence. Every sinking ship meant less fuel. Less food. Less steel. Less hope. Japan's factories slowed. Its soldiers starved. Its war machine began to choke. There was no single decisive battle. No dramatic invasion. Just relentless pressure, day after day, night after night. Steel shadows beneath black water. Torpedoes cutting through the dark. By the time Japan realized what was happening, it was already too late. This is the story of how America's submarines didn't just sink ships. They silenced an empire. The Pacific War is often remembered for its great battles. Pearl Harbor. Midway. Iwo Jima. Okinawa. But wars are not won by battles alone. They are won by supply lines. By fuel. By food. By steel moving across endless oceans. Imperial Japan built its empire on the sea. Every plane, every tank, every soldier depended on ships. Oil from Southeast Asia. Food from occupied territories. Raw materials from distant islands. If those ships stopped moving, the empire stopped breathing. At first, Japan believed the ocean would protect it. Its navy was powerful. Its convoys were vast. Its confidence absolute. But beneath the waves, a quiet campaign was beginning. American submarines slipped into the Pacific unnoticed. They did not seek confrontation. They sought disruption. They sought collapse. One torpedo at a time. One ship at a time. What followed was not a sudden defeat, but a slow strangulation. A war fought in darkness. A war of patience. A war Japan was never prepared to fight. This is the hidden story of how America's submarines turned the Pacific Ocean into a killing ground, and quietly rewrote the fate of the Second World War. Imperial Japan was powerful. But it was never self-sufficient. The home islands lacked oil. They lacked iron. They lacked rubber. They lacked food. To survive, Japan had to import almost everything. Oil came from the Dutch East Indies. Rubber came from Malaya. Iron ore came from China and Southeast Asia. Food came from occupied territories across the Pacific. All of it moved by sea. Thousands of merchant ships crossed open water every day. Slow ships. Lightly defended ships. Ships filled with the lifeblood of the empire. As long as those ships sailed, Japan could fight. If they stopped, Japan would slowly die. Japanese leaders understood this risk. But they believed speed would save them. They believed the war would end quickly. They believed America would lose the will to fight. Most of all, they believed their navy could protect them. Japan invested heavily in battleships. In aircraft carriers. In surface fleets built for decisive engagements. Submarines were an afterthought. Convoy protection was ignored. Anti-submarine warfare was underestimated. Merchant crews were poorly trained. Escorts were too few. Detection technology lagged behind. Japan was preparing to win battles. Not to survive a long war. As the empire expanded, the problem grew worse. Supply lines stretched thousands of miles. Convoys became harder to defend. Every new island meant another vulnerable route. By 1942, Japan's entire war effort rested on a fragile system of shipping. A system that could not afford heavy losses. A system with no backup. It was a weakness hidden beneath early victories. A weakness few in Tokyo truly understood. And beneath the waves of the Pacific, America was already moving toward it. Quietly. Patiently. Relentlessly. At the start of the war, American submarines were not seen as decisive. They were few in number. They were imperfect. And they were misunderstood. Many believed submarines were secondary weapons. Tools for scouting. Tools for harassment. Not weapons that could decide a war. But geography told a different story. The Pacific Ocean was vast. Too vast to control with surface fleets alone. Too vast to defend every route. Submarines did not need to control the sea. They only needed to haunt it. American boats slipped out of Pearl Harbor. From Australia. From island bases carved out of jungle and coral. They sailed alone. Often unsupported. Often unnoticed. Early on, problems nearly crippled the campaign. Faulty torpedoes missed their targets. Explosions failed to detonate. Perfect attacks ended in silence. Crews watched enemy ships escape unharmed. Morale suffered. Confidence wavered. But the patrols continued. By mid-1943, the flaws were fixed. Torpedoes began to explode. Targets began to sink. And the ocean began to change. American submarines adapted quickly. They learned shipping routes. They studied convoy patterns. They memorized harbors and choke points. They waited near narrow straits. Near oil routes. Near Japan's most critical supply lines. Each submarine became a lone hunter. Commanded by young officers. Trusted with absolute independence. There were no radios guiding them. No fleets backing them up. Just a captain. A crew. And the enemy's lifeline passing overhead. Every successful patrol weakened Japan's ability to fight. Every sinking removed fuel from aircraft. Steel from factories. Food from soldiers. Slowly, invisibly, the balance of power began to shift. Japan was winning battles. But beneath the waves, it was losing the war. Life aboard a World War II submarine was not heroic. It was brutal. It was claustrophobic. It was relentless. There was no space. No privacy. No escape. 80 men lived inside a steel tube. They slept inches from torpedoes. They ate beside engines. They worked surrounded by pipes, wires, and pressure. The air was heavy. Thick with diesel fumes. Oil. Sweat. Fresh air was rare. Showers were almost non-existent. Clothes stayed damp for weeks. Food spoiled quickly. Fresh supplies disappeared within days. Bread grew mold. Milk turned sour. As patrols dragged on, meals became monotonous. Canned food. Powdered eggs. Whatever could survive the heat. And the heat was unbearable. In tropical waters, temperatures inside the submarine climbed dangerously high. Men worked shirtless. Sweat poured constantly. Fatigue became normal. Sleep came in short shifts. 6 hours on. 6 hours off. Sometimes less. Depth charges were the worst. When enemy escorts found them, the ocean turned violent. Explosions slammed against the hull. Lights flickered. Bolts rattled. The submarine creaked under pressure. Men held their breath. Silence became survival. One mistake could kill everyone. Yet, they stayed. They followed orders. They returned to patrol again and again. Not for glory. Not for medals. But because they knew their mission mattered. Each patrol meant another chance to cut Japan's lifeline. Another chance to weaken the enemy. Another step toward ending the war. Inside those steel coffins, fear was constant. But so was discipline. So was determination. And beneath the crushing weight of the Pacific, America's submariners kept hunting. By 1943, the submarine war changed. Completely. What began as scattered attacks became a coordinated campaign. A system. A strategy designed to choke an empire. American commanders finally understood the scale of the opportunity. Japan was not being defeated at the front lines. It was being defeated at sea. Submarine patrols increased. Routes were refined. Targets were prioritized. Oil tankers became prime prey. So did troop transports. So did cargo ships carrying food and steel. Every patrol had a purpose now. Submarines stopped chasing warships. They hunted commerce instead. They hunted survival. Wolf-pack tactics began to emerge. Multiple submarines shared intelligence. Shipping lanes were mapped with deadly precision. Choke points became killing zones. The Luzon Strait. The South China Sea. The waters around Japan itself. Nowhere was truly safe. Japanese losses began to mount rapidly. Ships disappeared faster than they could be replaced. Experienced merchant crews were lost forever. New sailors lacked training. New ships lacked protection. Escorts were stretched thin. Convoys grew desperate. American submarines adapted relentlessly. Night surface attacks became common. Radar-guided torpedoes in darkness. Japanese defenses struggled to keep up. Each sinking had a ripple effect. Factories slowed. Aircraft sat grounded without fuel. Naval operations were reduced. Even Japan's mighty navy felt the strain. By late 1944, the impact was undeniable. More than half of Japan's merchant fleet was gone. Oil reserves collapsed. Food shortages spread across the empire. Soldiers in distant islands were cut off. Supplies never arrived. Reinforcements never came. They were left to starve. To wait. To surrender, or die. All of this happened without headlines. Without grand announcements. Without public celebration. The war beneath the waves did not need witnesses. It only needed time. And with every passing month, America's submarines tightened the noose. Japan was still fighting. Japan was still fighting. Still resisting. But the foundation of its empire was gone. The silent war had taken control. By 1944, the effects were impossible to hide. Japan was running out of time. And it was running out of everything else. Oil became the greatest crisis. Tankers stopped arriving. Refineries stood idle. Pilots trained less. Ships stayed in port. Entire fleets were immobilized. Without fuel, power meant nothing. Factories began to slow. Steel deliveries collapsed. Ammunition production fell behind demand. Aircraft were built without engines. Engines were built without fuel. The system was breaking apart. Food shortages followed quickly. Rice shipments declined. Fishing fleets lacked fuel to sail. Rations were cut. Then cut again. Civilians went hungry. Soldiers went hungry. Garrisons across the Pacific faced starvation. On isolated islands, Japanese troops waited for supplies that never came. No food. No medicine. No reinforcements. Only silence. Diseases spread rapidly. Malnutrition weakened entire units. Combat effectiveness collapsed without a single battle being fought. Even Japan's leadership felt the pressure. Emergency measures were introduced. Civilian consumption was restricted. But nothing could replace lost shipping. American submarines were sinking ships faster than Japan could build them. And new ships lacked trained crews. The merchant marine was bleeding to death. Japan tried desperate solutions. Wooden ships were rushed into service. Poorly armed. Poorly built. They did not last long. The sea had become a trap. Every voyage risked destruction. Every convoy sailed with fear. By 1945, Japan had lost nearly all effective merchant shipping. Its economy was paralyzed. Its military was crippled. This was not a dramatic collapse. There was no single moment of failure. It was slow. Methodical. Unstoppable. The empire Japan built through conquest was being dismantled by starvation. And the architects of this collapse were still unseen. Still silent. Still hunting beneath the Pacific waves. Japan knew it was under attack. But it never truly understood how to stop it. The Imperial Navy was built for surface combat. Battleships. Carriers. Decisive engagements between fleets. Submarine warfare was not its priority. Convoy escort doctrine was weak. Anti-submarine training was limited. Coordination was poor. Too few ships were assigned to protect merchant traffic. Too many were held back for battles that never came. Japanese sonar technology lagged behind. Detection ranges were short. Accuracy was unreliable. Often, submarines passed unseen. Air patrols were inconsistent. Fuel shortages grounded aircraft. Radar coverage was incomplete. The ocean remained wide and dangerous. Even when submarines were detected, Japan struggled to respond. Depth charges were crude. Attack patterns were ineffective. Many escorts lacked experience. Others lacked discipline. American submarines exploited every weakness. They learned enemy tactics. They adjusted their approach. If convoys sailed during the day, attacks came at night. If escorts hugged the coast, submarines waited offshore. Adaptation became survival. Japan attempted reforms. New escort vessels were designed. Training programs were expanded. But it was too late. Industry could not keep pace. Fuel shortages limited operations. Experienced crews were already gone. Each solution arrived months after it was needed. Worse still, Japan never centralized its defense. The Army and Navy failed to coordinate. Resources were divided. Responsibility was blurred. Meanwhile, American submarines operated with freedom. Independent command. Clear objectives. They were allowed to adapt quickly. To take risks. To innovate. Japan's defensive system was rigid. Slow to change. Slow to learn. The result was inevitable. The more Japan struggled to protect its shipping, the more exposed it became. The sea could not be sealed. The routes could not be defended. And beneath the waves, America's submarines continued to strike. Not because Japan did not fight back, but because it never learned how. By 1945, the Pacific had fallen quiet. Not because the war was over, but because Japan had nothing left to move. Its once busy sea lanes were empty. Its ports were silent. Its merchant fleet was shattered beyond recovery. Submarines now operated close to the Japanese home islands. In waters once thought untouchable. In zones once protected by pride and confidence. There was little resistance left. Fuel shortages kept escort ships docked. Air patrols rarely appeared. Convoys sailed only when absolutely necessary. And when they did, they were hunted. American submarines struck with near impunity. Targets were scarce. But every sinking still mattered. Each ship destroyed was another nail in the coffin. Japan's military could no longer maneuver. Troops could not be redeployed. Supplies could not be delivered. Even defensive operations suffered. When American forces advanced across the Pacific, Japanese units were isolated. Cut off. Abandoned. Some never fired a shot. They simply waited. Hungry. Exhausted. The submarine campaign had done its work. It did not win the war alone. But it made everything else possible. It weakened Japan before the invasions. It crippled its economy before the bombings. It stripped the empire of its ability to resist. By the time Japan surrendered, its maritime power was already dead. No dramatic final battle marked its end. No single moment of collapse. Just absence. Empty seas. Idle ports. Silent supply lines. The empire that once ruled the Pacific had been erased beneath the waves. And the submarines that achieved it slipped away. Unseen. Uncelebrated. But decisive. History often remembers the loudest moments. Explosions. Invasions. Battles that shook the world. But some victories are quiet. America's submarine campaign did not dominate headlines. It did not produce famous heroes. It did not end the war overnight. Yet it changed everything. By strangling Japan's supply lines, submarines attacked the foundation of empire itself. Not armies. Not cities. But survival. Without fuel, planes could not fly. Without food, soldiers could not fight. Without materials, factories could not produce. Japan was defeated long before surrender was announced. This campaign reshaped modern naval warfare. It proved that control of logistics mattered more than control of territory. That patience could be deadlier than power. It also revealed the human cost of silent war. Men who fought unseen. Crews who vanished beneath the sea. Victories measured in tonnage, not applause. After the war, navies around the world took notice. Submarines were no longer secondary weapons. They became central to strategy. The lessons learned beneath the Pacific waves still shape military thinking today. When Japan's empire collapsed, it was not crushed in a single blow. It was slowly silenced. One ship at a time. One patrol at a time. One quiet victory after another. And beneath the endless waters of the Pacific, America's submarines left behind a legacy. Proof that the most powerful weapon in war is not always the one that makes the most noise. The Second World War ended with surrender ceremonies and signatures. With flags lowered. With weapons laid down. But long before that moment, the outcome had already been decided beneath the sea. While the world watched battleships burn and cities fall, a quieter war had done its work. A war without parades. Without speeches. Without applause. American submariners returned home quietly. Some never returned at all. Their victories were counted in ships sunk. In supply lines severed. In an empire slowly brought to silence. Today, the Pacific looks calm. Endless blue water. Peaceful horizons. But below that surface lies history. Steel hulls. Forgotten wrecks. Echoes of a war fought in darkness. The story of America's submarines is not just a story of technology. It is a story of patience. Of endurance. Of unseen sacrifice. It reminds us that power does not always announce itself. Sometimes, it waits. Sometimes, it listens. And sometimes, It ends empires without ever being seen. This was the silent war beneath the Pacific. And this was how an empire was silenced.